The next study being presented is the IN.PACT SFA Randomized Trial, 3-year outcomes. This will be presented by Dr. Prakash Krishnan.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the VIVA Council for allowing me the opportunity to present this landmark study. So my charge today is to present the results of the IN.PACT SFA randomized trial and the 3-year outcomes. So just as a background, I mean, all of you have heard the 1-year and the 2-year presentations, and they've also been published in peer-reviewed journals. So as a background, I think in our practices, drug-coated balloons have significantly changed the treatment landscape for femoral popliteal disease. And to look at the two FDA-approved drug-coated balloons and their results in a nutshell, if you look at the primary patency of the IN.PACT DCB at 1 year, it was 87.5%, and at 2 years it was 78.9%. And if you can compare that to Lutonix DCB at 1 year, it's 73.5% and 58.6%. I think one can conclude very clearly that DCBs do work as compared to PTA in femoral popliteal disease. But more importantly in our clinical practice and also to our patients' quality of life and probably to the global economic impact, clinically reducible TLR is quite important as well. And again, you can see the same trend with the IN.PACT DCB at 1 year at 2.4%, the lowest ever reported, I believe, and at 2 years at 9.1%. And Lutonix DCB also showing the efficacy at 12.3% and at 18%. Though unfair to compare across clinical trials, I think we can say that the unique DCB designs and the variable clinical outcomes across the technology platform support that there really may not be a class effect and that each one of these balloons may need to be looked at on the merits of its own data. So my hope today is to present the 3-year results and answer the question of what I think is most important to all of us, which is the durability of IN.PACT DCB in the long term of 3 years. So again, this is a slide that all of you have seen probably multiple times, but I think it's important to present it. And again, it's an overview which looks at the objective of the trial was to assess the safety and efficacy of the IN.PACT Admiral DCB versus standard PTA for the treatment of superficial femoral and proximal popliteal artery disease due to claudication and rest pain. It was a European and American trial with approximately 150 patients and 181 patients enrolled, respectively, in both areas of the world, and total 331 patients enrolled, giving it robust level 1 clinical evidence. It was rigorous and unbiased, with independent and core lab adjudicated ultrasound as well as angiographic core lab data adjudication, and also had a clinical events committee and an independent data safety monitoring board, again showing the robustness of the data that I'm going to present. And also the durability of the outcomes was assessed. As we spoke, the durability of these therapies are very important, and this is going to be followed up for up to 5 years. These are the contributing sites, again, both in Europe and in America. And again, to stress, the primary efficacy endpoint was defined specifically as primary patency within 12 months, defined as freedom from clinically driven TLR and duplex ultrasound-derived restenosis with a PSVR ratio of less than 2.4. And the primary safety endpoint in any new technology, very important, was freedom from device and procedure-related death through 30 days and freedom from target limb major amputation and CD-TLR within 12 months. Now, all individual components of the primary endpoints and key secondary endpoints were adjudicated by the blinded CEC through 5 years. And the restenosis, again, was assessed by blinded duplex and angiographic core lab, again, showing the rigor of the trial. So, baseline characteristics. Important when we see is, most importantly, there was no differences between the two study arms. And again, when you look at the actual patients and the population included, you can see there was a preponderance and a high preponderance of diabetics, hypertensives, and current smokers. And this was clearly a Rutherford 2-3 study with a smattering of 4 that was in the trial as well. Important baseline clinical characteristics for an IDE study. The lesion length of 8.94 centimeters was the longest of any drug-eluted randomized control IDE studied to date. The total occlusions were also well represented in the drug-coated balloon arm at 25.8% and 19% in the PTA arm, as was calcification of 59.3%. Again, you can see severe calcification was less as to the concerns that was expressed earlier by Dr. Badi in terms of these severely calcified lesions, but it was still there at 8.1% versus 6.2%. And provisional stent rates were also reported low at 7.3% versus 12.6%, so that we can actually see the effectiveness of the drug and not be confounded by the presence of the stent. And remarkably, the IN.PACT SFA trial has shown durable primary patency through 3 years, which is, again, very consistent and in line with the 1 and 2 year data that's been reported and published in this trial. So the 3-year primary patency, as reported by duplex ultrasound, was 69.5% in the DCB arm versus 45.1% in the PTA arm, with the difference of 24.4%. Now, the duplex ultrasound criteria is very exciting, but as I said, the clinically driven TLR is incredibly impactful for our patients and also for the economic viability of all our procedures. So you can see here there was a significant reduction in clinically driven TLR through 3 years at 84.5% in the IN.PACT DCB arm versus 70.4% in the PTA arm, with a delta of 14.1%. So if you look at the effectiveness outcomes in a nutshell, the clinically driven TLR, 15.2% versus 31%. All TLR, 16.2% to 34%. But more importantly, the first time to first clinically driven TLR was very important and was very significantly reduced in the IN.PACT DCB arm at 542.9 days versus 302 days. Other important to remember was that the clinical improvement was no difference, but at the cost of repeat procedures in the PTA arm, and that also showed no difference in the ABI at 3 years because of the need for repeat procedures in the PTA arm. Now, again, the efficacy is outstanding, and the trial has to be proven to be safe as well. So the safety outcomes were looked at very rigorously as well. You see here that there is a difference in the primary safety composite endpoint as well as the major adverse events, which was a combination of the death, the clinically driven TLR, the target major limb amputation, and thrombosis. And the difference was 81.2% in the IN.PACT arm and only 64.1% at the PTA arm. So what's important to look at is when there is such a difference, to really look and adjudicate what was happening here. But if you look at very specifically, there was a difference in all-cause death, but there was no difference in device or procedure-related death, clinically target major limb amputation, or thrombosis that really drove this endpoint. So when we started to do a deep dive into the procedure related to death as the cause and see whether or not this was related to the procedure or the drug, it is clear to see all the deaths within the study have been adjudicated independently. So you can see all the deaths here have been broken down into the cause of the death. And important to remember that the median time to first death was approximately 1.8 years or around 600 plus days in the IN.PACT DCB arm, showing no relation to either the procedure or to the drug itself, or I should say unlikely to have a relation to both. So if you look at 3-year functional outcomes in the 6-minute walk test, there was no differences between the DCB and the PTA. However, very important to remember that the DCB patients achieved the same level of function with 48% fewer reinterventions. And this was also shown in the walking impairment questionnaire. Again, we're showing no difference. However, there was a 48% decrease in the repeat for need reinterventions. So in conclusion, I can summarize that the IN.PACT SFA trial showed superior 3-year patency and low intervention rates with the IN.PACT Admiral drug-coated balloon. These results were durable. This is the first independently adjudicated randomized pivotal IDE trial to show durable treatment effect with the DCB through 3 years. It's safe. Results demonstrated long-term safety of the IN.PACT Admiral DCB. Important, all the deaths were adjudicated and highly unlikely to be related to either the paclitaxel or in the balloon or to the procedure itself. And I think it's time to say that the data support a paradigm shift in our therapy with the IN.PACT Admiral as a first-line treatment option for the treatment of symptomatic femoral popliteal disease. I thank you for your attention.
Dr. Krishnan, thank you very much for that very compelling data. Your commentary that it's a paradigm shift. There's been a recent paradigm shift, or it would seem to be that this whole concept of vessel preparation as opposed to pre-dilatation prior to the administration of a DCB. This has been, I understand, a recent evolution in the mind of the FDA and rewording of the IFU. How are you integrating that change? I saw that you did have some severe calcification that was small, but there was calcification. How has this change in thinking altered your actual use of DCBs in any way? It seems like very compelling data that would be difficult to actually improve.
But I think that the severe calcium arm has been left out, predominantly in this particular IDE study. But I think the vessel prep is incredibly important in these arms, because studies, as you know, by Finelli and others have shown that this may be a barrier to possibly the absorption of the drug and the long-term patency of this, the effect of the drug. So, but I think the question needs to be answered: is it recoil that's causing the restenosis, or is it actually the poor absorption of the drug? And I think the studies such as the study being conducted by VIVA, I think are going to go forward in answering those questions.
Dr. Das, any comments?
We have a new comparator now, right? So it used to be balloon angioplasty is the comparator. This is now what we have to look at this at. So if you look at the VIVA objective performance criteria and then all of the control arms for these trials that we've been looking at in the SFA, they all kind of reach about a 30 to 33% patency at 1 year. So comparing that, we now have something that is almost 70% patency. I would be curious to see if you start parsing out these issues, calcium, the longer lesions, the complex, whether these patencies may be even higher than that. So do you have data on those separately at all that we can understand a little bit better? Because the composite data point is actually quite impressive.
Well, I don't have data as such on each one of those, but I think the part of that is also our technique of balloon angioplasty has evolved as well. I think in the past we were up and down with balloon angioplasty. We weren't giving the balloon enough time to actually reduce the recoil of the vessel and actually prevent or tack up the dissections theoretically. So I think if you looked at both the Zilver PTX study as well as our study, the results of balloon angioplasty both in DCB and DES have been remarkably higher than the other published literature. I think part of that may be because of the technique. Part of that may be the subselection of cherry-picked patients without severe calcification and good runoff. So it's hard for me to postulate on that.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the committee.